To start off, I'd first like to introduce Tess Whitfield. So she's our current acting director. She's also a Rotarian from the Club of Toronto Twilight. So we're really excited for her to join us today to be on the call. So it'll mostly be her and I speaking. So my name's Allison Kingston. I'm also a Shelterbox. I'm a community and Rotary fundraising coordinator, and I'm a Rotaractor with the Rotaract Club of Toronto. So I'm just going to jump right in and ask Tess the first question, which is the clearest question I can ask. Who is Shelterbox?
Awesome. Well, thanks, Allison. And before I jump in, I just want to say thank you to all of you for taking some time out of your day, and happy new Rotary Year. We're so grateful to have you on board and taking this time to learn a little bit more about Shelterbox. I see quite a few familiar faces, which is fantastic. And so as Allison mentioned, if you have any questions that pop up, just let us know, and we're here to help. So for those of you who might not know, last year more than 104 million people around the world were displaced from their homes from conflict and natural disaster. And on average, only 1 in 5 families receive the shelter that they need after being displaced. And so this is really why Shelterbox exists. We're an international disaster relief organization aiming to really provide emergency shelter and essential tools to families all over the world after disaster. We're a Rotary project partner in disaster relief, and we're really aiming to work with Rotary to support as many families as possible. We really know that shelter is more than just a roof. It's really about providing a home for families. I think that's become so much more apparent as we're all sheltering in place. We're all really aware of the space that we're in, and so it's really important, especially now, to be able to provide families with safe shelter. And so we also know really that we can't replace what's lost for families, but we can provide them with the essential tools to not only kickstart their own recovery, but provide them with tools to be able to rebuild. So whether it's sheltering families from the burning heat, the bitter cold as we're coming into winter, or dangerous animals and diseases, we really aim to provide a customized and really flexible solution for families to meet their needs wherever they are on that process of recovery.
Awesome. Thanks, Tess. And kind of leading into who we are, is where are we working right now?
Yeah, so Shelterbox is very busy as usual. We're currently responding in 9 countries around the world to both natural disasters and conflict areas, as I mentioned. But really quickly, I wanted to just take a minute just to talk. We've been getting a lot of questions. The joys of all of us being virtual is that Allison and myself have been doing a ton of virtual presentations to clubs all over the country over the last few months. And the question we often get asked is, how we're responding to COVID-19 in our current deployments. And of course, like you, Shelterbox is really concerned about the impacts of coronavirus that it's having on our lives here at home, but especially around the world. And as I mentioned, shelter is such an integral part in keeping families safe. It's really that first opportunities for families to be safe and shelter in place. And so Shelterbox, we're looking at how we can actually alter some of our aid items, including things like soap and water and wash basins to families, as well as some educational materials to teach them and work with our partners in the field to tell them about the importance of hand washing and wearing a mask and hygiene. But really focusing on making sure we're providing that emergency shelter really now more than ever to make sure that families have the safe shelter they need. So we're working in refugee camps across in the Syrian region, in Cameroon, Nigeria, to really provide that emergency shelter. A lot of camps, especially Minawao camp in Cameroon, is already at capacity, and so we're looking at how can we support working with our partners in the region to really provide more tents to families, move them out of sort of collective centers and into their own safe shelter. So we're always innovating, as I'll speak to in a little bit, but COVID-19, I think, has made us all pivot in so many ways, and Shelterbox is definitely looking at how we can continue to support families in this really unprecedented global pandemic.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think it's important too to understand when we are on the ground, we work with the local community to really understand what they need and allow them to lead their own recovery. So it's not just us going in, dropping some tents and leaving. We're really with them for the long term. But that being said, once we enter a camp or displacement center post natural disaster, what happens to the aid once the need's gone, and what happens once we leave?
Yeah, this is a question we get all the time, and honestly, it's probably one of my favorites. We used to have a picture up in our office that sort of displayed just this of a family in the Philippines, and you can see that they've used their tent also for their place of business. I think it's really important to remember that when natural disasters or conflict force families from their home or destroy their homes, that it's not just houses that are lost, it's schools, it's community centers, it's places of worship, it's places where people are running their businesses, are making a living. And so we've seen everything from, in this photo of Batnazar, of families, turning their tents into spaces where they can sew, where they can make a living. We've seen our tents being reused in China in the past for bee colonies to help stimulate their family and local economy. We've also heard some really amazing stories from our response team members over the years, who are incredible volunteers who deploy into the field and work with families of families actually unraveling unused rope. We typically send in our shelter kits rope for families if they need to repair their home. They'll unravel the rope and retie it for fishing nets. So it's really up to the families. I mean, they know what they need far better than we do. They're the experts in their own recovery. So it's about providing the aid, and then it's theirs to keep, however they want to use it. There's also some really lovely photos that we've gotten back all over the years, throughout the years, of our big green shelter boxes, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, whether you've seen it at a district conference or convention, of families tying blankets around it, turning them into cribs, or wash basins for their babies. So it's really important that after the families receive their aid, it's theirs to keep, and whether that's reusing it or reselling it, it's up to them.
Awesome. Thanks, Tess. And also, so going forward, so we know we've helped families like Fatnazar in Indonesia and places in the Philippines, but really, how do we choose which areas receive our aid and what families we're able to help?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a really hard one, to be completely honest. It's never an easy decision, and we know that the need is growing every year. I mentioned that 104 million people around the world. Well, the year prior it was 88 million. So we know that this need is growing year over year, and that we're going to need to continue to make difficult decisions. But really what we do is we have an amazing team of operations managers in the UK, where our headquarters is located, who are constantly monitoring. They're working with partners, they're talking to local Rotarians on the ground, and we're making assessments to see, things like, is the shelter box aid solution really right for this situation? Are tents appropriate to be pitching in this area? Are shelter kits a better solution? But we're always looking to consider what the type of disaster was, what the level of damage might be. We are also looking at things like the needs of the communities and their ability to recover. And before selecting the right type of support, we have a lot of questions that we ask ourselves, and we have a complete decision to respond criteria that we move through. And so it's also looking at, can we even get aid into the country? Is there really a need or a gap that other organizations aren't providing where we're needed? We pre-position some of our aid around the world in hubs so that we can respond quicker, and so that we can really make sure we're moving through aid year over year. But really, there's so many factors that go into deciding, are we even allowed to respond in country? Has the government requested support? But again, once we decide if we're ready to respond, it's always about looking and seeing what families need and if we're the right fit. And again, it's never going to be an easy decision. And unfortunately, one of the things we also have to consider is, do we have capacity? Do we have staff? Do we have the aid available? And so it's honestly thanks to the support of clubs like all of yours that make it possible to respond that much quicker. But there's always going to be families we can't reach. And when we are deploying in country, though, we prioritize the most vulnerable. So are there child-led households, single-parent-led households, elderly, or people who are differently abled, prioritizing, once we do decide we're going to respond, who actually receives that aid. But it's a challenging question, for sure.
For sure. And I feel like for the people in ops, it's even more challenging one to answer.
Absolutely.
And like you mentioned at the beginning, we do constantly try to revise our aid and talk to families we work with to make sure we provide the right tool for the given situation. But I was hoping you could just talk a little bit about the evolution of our aid, because we are at our 20th anniversary. There's been so many evolutions, and I was hoping you could just touch on those.
Yeah, absolutely. And great that you mentioned the 20th anniversary. For those who might not know, we're celebrating 20 years of disaster relief this year, which is very exciting, but that definitely has come with changes. If any of you have been following Shelter Box for the number of years, you're familiar, I imagine, with the big green box or the big white tent. It's what we're most well known for sure. But like I said before, we're always, listening to the families that we're working with. We're always looking at how can we be providing the best possible aid options. And so some of the ways that we really aim to sort of evolve and stay as innovative as possible is 3 to 6 months after we deploy in country, we actually return and we have a specific team that goes in to learn from the family to figure out, was this the right aid? Was there something that was missing? Did this work the way you were expecting it? And have a whole kind of slew of questions for us to ask so that we can do a better job next time and so that we can continue to learn. Some of my favorite examples of this is our water filter. So we use a water filter now that actually stops filtering water when it's no longer filtering at 100%. And why that's really important is we operate in that emergency shelter phase, so providing families with what they need immediately. And we need to really ensure that after we leave, that families are still safe and their communities are starting to rebuild. And in the past, we had this water filter that was a great water filter and it did the job, but it was really difficult for families sometimes to be able to tell when to stop using the filter. Water was still coming out, but it might not have been clean. And so we realized that there was another filter on the market we could switch to that meant that water actually stopped coming out. There was no concern of families drinking unsafe water after we had left. Another really just basic example is we're always looking to work with the manufacturers who provide our aid as well. We work with Luminaid, who's an amazing company out of Chicago, founded by 2 amazing female entrepreneurs. And we've worked with Luminaid over the years to provide our solar lights, which are pretty incredible little solar lights. I recommend you take a look at them. But over time, we worked with families. We were learning from families that actually when one of the original lights, when you turned it on, it turned on at the brightest setting. And so they were dimming, they were kind of losing their charge, their solar lights quicker. And so actually we worked with Luminaid to switch it so that the first button that you press actually starts at the lowest and they can make it brighter as it goes. So it's about making sure that not only is it the right aid, but is the aid the most efficient? Is it the best use of aid to provide to families? So we're always growing, we're always kind of adapting what goes in that big green box or what goes out to families to make sure that it's exactly what people need.
Awesome, thanks. And I think, too, the importance of adaptation also speaks to the importance of flexibility and what that really looks like in a response. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the importance of flexibility, especially referencing to our shelter kit, which I know is newer in Shelter Box. So I was hoping you could talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. So our shelter kit, if you haven't seen it, it's sort of one of our, we say new, but it's been kind of about 5 years now. So we've been using it for quite some time, but it's really over the years we were finding that the shelter box and the tent is a fantastic solution for families who have lost everything, who really need that tent to kickstart their recovery and get into that safe shelter. But for years, we didn't really have a solution for families who had maybe lost part of their roof or their wall or needed to repair their home, or even who wanted to start locally, sort of building a locally appropriate shelter right away. I think everybody's process of recovery looks a little bit different from family to family and community to community. And so the shelter kit really allows us to be a lot more flexible. And so it comes with 2 heavy-duty tarps that you can see there in the photo, a shovel, a saw, a hoe, rope, all of the fixings that a family might need to be able to repair or rebuild. And so it's about, again, kind of being as flexible as possible and making sure that we have the right solution for families. And my favorite story I'd say to speak to this is Eliza. So she's the photo there on the right-hand side of your screen. And so during the flooding in Malawi back in 2015, when we had started using kind of the early years of us using a shelter kit, there was flooding in Malawi, and Eliza's family actually lost a wall and the roof of their home. Everybody in their community, for the most part, received a combination of the shelter box and a tent, so what are more sort of traditionally, what we think of more as our traditional aid items. But that just wasn't a great solution for Eliza. Eliza is blind and epileptic, and she's caring for her younger siblings. And so she really navigates her home by touch and knows the layout of her home. And so providing a tent just wasn't a really great solution for her and her family. And so what we were able to do was provide her actually with, our shelter box team was able to provide her with a shelter kit. So she could stay in her home, she could repair it, work with the community, and really provide her with a place, Eliza and her family, with a place that she knew and was familiar with. So again, it's just about providing those options to families and working with families so that we're not making any assumptions, that we're really meeting those really specific needs, and having this new range of aid beyond just that really traditional box really helps us do that.
Thanks. And just speaking, like you said, about our response team members and how they're on the ground, we know that Rotary helps us in severe ways when it comes to funding, but also how does Rotary help Shelterbox be just beyond the donation portion?
Yeah, this is a huge question. So many ways, so many incredible ways. For those of you who might not know, Rotary has really supported Shelterbox from the beginning. We started as a millennial project, hence our 20 years, back in 2000 in Helston, Cornwall in the UK, and we've since grown into our own organization. So we have Rotary roots. That's sort of where our project partnership really comes from, which was solidified in 2012 as International Project Partners in Disaster Relief and has continued since. And Rotarians are an amazingly important part of this organization. As Alison mentioned, myself and Alison and other members of staff are Rotarians and Rotaractors all over the organization across the world, from our volunteers, from our staff members and our SRTs. So not only is Rotary sort of within the DNA of our organization, but also within the staff and the leadership. But I think one part that's really interesting beyond the incredible generous donations that Rotary clubs give, which ultimately makes this work possible. This is, a Shelterbox story, but it's also the story of Rotary giving back and making this all possible and supporting families. But Rotary also helps us a ton on the ground. So when we're working in areas and communities where oftentimes Rotarians will get in touch with our teams to let us know of a situation, or we'll work with Rotarians to figure out, are there communities that are being overlooked? Are there logistics that they can support us with? Rotarians have done everything from giving us free storage space in country to renting helicopters for us to fly over Guatemala to see the damage after the volcano a few years ago, to, co-signing aid and helping us really get aid into countries. It's so much more than that sort of surface level support. It's really integrated all throughout our organization, and it sets us apart as an aid organization, to be completely honest. It's a network of amazing people of action who are excited and passionate about making a difference, and it's that passion, I think, that really comes through in our organization. And myself, I was with Shelterbox for a number of years before I became a Rotarian, and I think that's the story for a lot of us as well. We come to Shelterbox and then we learn about the power of Rotary and get on board. So it goes far beyond just only donations, which are still very valuable and incredible.
Yeah, and John sent us a question in the chat that I think fits really nicely in here when it comes to working with Rotary to help us get in places that might be harder for us to work. John asks, how do we deliver our aid without necessarily being able to get into the direct disaster or the conflict area?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a really topical question right now, considering, as you can imagine, COVID-19 is making it incredibly challenging for international travel, and we really need to prioritize not only the safety of our staff and volunteers, but the safety of the families and communities we're working in. And so we work with partners is a huge part of what we do, not only with Rotary clubs and districts and Rotarians and communities, but other organizations on the ground. So within the UN shelter cluster, working with other organizations, whether it's working with, in some situations, government agencies or the Red Cross. We work with Habitat for Humanity quite often as well, or if there's other more localized kind of smaller organizations, oftentimes in conflict zones as well. Working with organizations who are already on the ground, who either speak the language, have a deeper understanding of the cultural context and sort of the geography, and working really kind of hand in hand to make sure that not only are we getting the information we need to do proper assessments, but we also often do what we call train the trainer. So our response team and our training department in the UK, of our operations department, will actually train the other partner organizations for them to be able to train community members. So it's really integrated. It's not just, you know, sort of transactional. It's really making sure that that we can do this safely. And we've been working with partners for a long time. We're quite good at it. We really have a real network of amazing other organizations that we partner with. And I think COVID-19 has really stressed the limits for that for us and made us really recognize just how important those partnerships are.
Awesome. So then the next question is, I think, reasonably important, is how is Shelterbox funded? So we know Rotary contributes to us a lot, but how are we funded overall?
Yeah, so we're funded by public donations. We don't receive any government funding here in Canada, so it's Canadian individuals, for many of which are Rotarians, companies, different clubs. About 40% of our funding here in Canada comes from the generosity of Rotary clubs, and it's really about getting in front of as many people as we can and raising awareness and funds to be able to reach our mission. But we don't receive any government funding, so it's all the generous support of people who are passionate about the work that we do.
Awesome. So we've been hearing a lot about how Rotary has helped us be so successful, both through funding and on the ground. But I think, too, we at Shelterbox have a lot to offer Rotary clubs as well. I was hoping you could speak a little bit to how we can help you strengthen clubs and entice new members.
Absolutely. So that's such a great point. I think, you know, we often talk about, you know, Rotary gives so much to Shelterbox in terms of donations and that logistical support, but we have lots to offer you back, and I think that's the true, you know, strength of a partnership is kind of what can we help Rotary clubs with, especially right now. You know, we were talking before this started with Gail Marie about, you know, everything's online, how do fundraisers happen, and that's some area that Shelterbox has some experience in. So one thing is what we found over the years is that we're a really popular project for Interact, Rotaract, and Youth Exchange here in Canada. We have lots of districts who support us with Youth Exchange challenges, Interact and Rotaract clubs across most districts. And I think over the years, we've really seen that younger sort of generation of Rotarians and just in general are really excited about Shelterbox. I think Shelterbox is a really easy thing for people to understand. You kind of see the box, or you see the kit, and you can resonate with it. And so we've been able to really attract a younger crowd. And so my sort of suggestion or my offering to all of you is that we have so many amazing case studies of Shelterbox in our work. We have volunteers across the country, all the way from kind of the Yukon to PEI, who have shelter boxes in their communities. Pitching a big white tent often brings people to you. All of our aid is branded with Shelterbox and Rotary, and I think we have lots of resources to help you tell the story, but really about the impact Rotary has working with Shelterbox to support these families. So because I think the story is so interwoven, we can really offer back to you, hopefully, some ways of, you know, bringing in maybe a new crowd or engaging with your community. We have so many stories of like me, you know, people who join Rotary or Shelterbox and become Rotarians, but we're here to support you as well to make sure that you feel confident telling the Shelterbox story through that Rotary lens so that you can speak to Shelterbox and the amazing work that Rotary enables through the work that we're able to do as well.
Speaking of the resources we have for you.
Yes, perfect segue. So one of the reasons a few years ago we started realizing we have all these great resources that we want to give back, and so we created a special space on our website that I'd really encourage you to check out if you're interested in bringing Shelterbox back to your club or into your district, and that's the toolkit. It's being constantly updated by the wonderful Allison, and she's putting in new great resources in there all of the time, but it's really a space specifically designed for Rotarians and Rotary clubs to provide you with the information that you need to bring Shelterbox into your network or your community. We have lots of resources to get you started also on raising funds and awareness. Whether you choose to, you know, use our ideas and use them to fundraise for your club or you use them to fundraise for Shelterbox, I think at this point with COVID especially, we need to just be out there. And as a fellow foundation chair, you know, in my Rotary Club, we're struggling with how do we get in front of people right now? How do we raise dollars? And I'm using a lot of the skills I've learned through my years at Shelterbox to bring to my club, and so we want to share that back with you as well. Hopefully it's to support Shelterbox, but also just to support Rotary and the network we have around the world. So there's lots of things on there around district newsletters every month. Allison puts together a really great district newsletter if you are interested in having that in your newsletter every month or sharing with your club. We have virtual presentations that we can be doing. We've got lots of case studies and resources, again, if you want to sort of use the resources that we have to engage with your community potentially in a different way. We also have a Luminate fundraiser that we run, so those amazing solar lights I mentioned. It's sort of, if you think back to when you were younger, when your kids used to sell chocolate bars, the Luminate fundraiser is kind of the same model, where you can purchase Luminates, resell them to your community, and part of the proceeds come back to Shelterbox. So if you're looking for a way to support us, but just don't have the dollars in your account this year, which we completely understand, there are some other ways for clubs to raise funds or get involved, you know, with a club or with Shelterbox. So I'd encourage you to check out, and actually the next slide here is, I just wanted to highlight my personal favorite part of the Action Toolkit, which is the Training Center. And so the Training Center was working with our operations department. I mentioned that we have this amazing team of trainers who train our volunteers and our staff who actually go out into the field. And so we sort of mined their brains and mined all their information and the years of experience to share with everybody else. So there's some really amazing resources on there about, you know, how to do goal setting, communications. It's all, you know, how we work in really high stake leadership situations, high stress situations, how we train our volunteers to be leaders in their field, in the sector and communities, and sharing that back with you with a real Rotary lens. So we looked at, you know, how could you use this to set goals for the new Rotary year, or, you know, look at effective communication models that we use, again, in those high stress situations. How could you use them as Rotarians in your clubs and communities? So there's some worksheets in there. I'd highly recommend, if any of that sounds interesting, to check it out. And again, it's about how can we support you as well. So more and more with things going virtual, Allison and I get lots of emails from clubs saying, you know, we want to raise money, but we just don't know how. If that sounds familiar, get in touch with us, and we would love to work with you to figure out a solution. I'm confident that we can really work to not only, you know, improve or sort of bring awareness to the amazing work your club does in your community, but also the work that Rotary and Shelterbox do together internationally.
Awesome. Now this is a bit of my favorite part. After you talked about your favorite part being the training center, it's the book club. I was wondering if you could just speak quickly on the book club.
Yeah, so this is yeah, absolutely. So again, Allison is, we've deemed her our head bookworm here at Shelterbox Canada. Recently, we launched a new book club. So with everybody spending more and more time at home and maybe not feeling as connected as we'd like to, we launched a book club, which has been very exciting. And especially now with Rotary Literacy Month here in September, I just wanted to make sure we mentioned our Shelterbox book club. So every 6 weeks, we read a new book that's set in a country that Shelterbox is deployed to. We offer members really unique and exclusive content. We've had live Q&As with every author since we've launched. We actually have one upcoming next week with the latest authors from our new book, Home. So we're always, you know, having really amazing discussions. There's a Facebook group you can join. If you're a reader at all, I'd recommend joining us. But even if you're not, I'd say join us anyway. And the interviews we've been having with these authors are really amazing. We've had people from all over the world telling their stories of, you know, their refugee journeys or what it was like after disaster, and they've just been really amazing to not only read their stories, but to then be able to engage with them every sort of 6 weeks, every month through these Q&As. So recommend that you join us, or if there's any, you know, readers in your club, feel free to share it. We would love to have more Rotarians especially join us, especially with Literacy Month this month.
Awesome. So first off, I want to say a huge thank you for being on this call today and being able to be here to answer questions. And I want to thank everyone who joined us. I do have a few questions in the chat I would love to ask you, Tess, but first I want to remind everyone the email's on the screen there, rotary@shelterboxcanada.org. If you have any questions at all, feel free to send us an email. We're more than happy to respond. Our website's there as well if you want more information. If you add a /action toolkit to the end, you get right to the toolkit. Tons of resources in there for you. So Tess, the first one is, oh my gosh, where'd it go? What is the cost of a shelter box typically?
Yeah, great question. So typically the cost of a shelter box is about 1,200 Canadian dollars. But I just want to stress that really over the years, I'm sure for some of you who've been with us for a long time, you're used to just sponsoring that shelter box, and that's that big goal, $1,200, which is so amazing and generous and goes to supporting our aid. But I also just want to stress that really any donation that comes to shelter box, whether it be $10, $1,200, goes to supporting our range of aid items. So as I mentioned, our shelter kits are about $150 Canadian, our tents are about $500. So it's really any donation really goes to supporting and allows us to be flexible. We're not just providing those boxes anymore, we're providing that range of options. So every donation really counts. Our solar lights are $50. We send 2 to every family. So every little bit, even if it's not that big, $1,200, every bit makes a difference. But the box, yeah, typically $1,200.
Awesome. And thanks, Marcy, for that question. The next one comes from Gail Marie, and it's, has Shelterbox set up as a foundation?
So we're not a foundation, but we are a registered charity. So we're a Canadian registered charity, meaning that we follow the rules of the CRA, but we also issue tax receipts of $20 or more of a donation. And happy to provide any more information if there's kind of a more specific question that you might have had around that, but we are a registered charity here in Canada.
Awesome. And the last question is also from Gail Marie. Unless anyone has any other, make sure you put them in the chat now so we make sure we get them answered for you. But it's, how do you join the book club? I'll take this one just because,
yeah, I was gonna
that's
say,
my
you're
realm of
best
the world right now. So to join the book club, you can do it 2 ways. So the first one is to go directly through your Facebook, type in Shelterbox Book Club North America. The group should pop up. You can just request to join by typing in your email. Easy as that. The second one is to visit our website, shelterboxcanada.org/book-club. So that'll give you more descriptions about the books we've been reading, what we're currently reading, as well as what it means to be in the book club. There you can type in your email, get sent an invitation, and it goes just like that. We'd love to have you. Our author is coming in September 12th, or authors rather, since it's co-authored, coming in September 12th.
Yeah, and I just dropped the link into the description box, or into the chat box there as well if you want to join us. And you can go back, all the videos are recorded from the previous authors if you want to go back and watch. They've all been truly fantastic.
Awesome. So I haven't got any more questions in the chat. So thank you everyone for coming. Once again, emails on the screen. If anything comes to your mind at all in the next few days, send us an email. We're happy to answer. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
everyone. Very good.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. And just real quickly before you go, I just wanted to mention as well that we are more than happy to do a presentation to your club, as I mentioned. So if you are interested in booking a presenter, get in touch with Allison and she'd be happy to get that set up for you. But thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a fantastic, if not sort of different or slightly, not as expected Rotary year, but I think it'll be a great one. So enjoy and let us know if we can help you in any way.
Thank you.
Take care.